QT Academy, empowering teachers to empower each other.
Welcome to the 11th in our series of the QT Academy member webinars on the elements of the QT model. My name is Michelle Ware, a Senior Quality Teaching Advisor here at the University of Newcastle. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where I'm broadcasting from at the University of Newcastle Callaghan campus. I would like to acknowledge the Awabakal people and the Pambalong clan and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'd also like to welcome Indigenous colleagues who are joining this webinar today. When we started these webinars way back in August 2022, there were originally just designs for the trickiest QT elements to be provided in these webinars, the ones that created the most questions in our workshops, such as problematic knowledge and meta-language. But as time has gone on, we've decided to expand this useful resource to include all 18 of the elements. You'll find the existing recordings in our QTA members area. So our aims this afternoon are to deepen your knowledge of background knowledge and to consider some implications for our own practice in terms of classroom assessment and programming. If you have any questions at the end of the webinar, please feel free to reach out to us via email. We'd be really happy to answer them. So this element prompts us to remember to tap into the value of students' background knowledge, not only checking in to find out what they already understand and what they know from prior school learning, but also to take the opportunity to get to know about our students' families, their backgrounds, the community, and their life experiences that continue to shape their out-of-school knowledge. It also prompts us to think about how we can link this rich source of understanding with the key ideas and concepts in our lessons and assessment tasks. And of course, there are great benefits from knowing our students well, in addition to the more academic aspects. It helps us build positive and supportive relationships. And we think about those incidental moments in the playground while perhaps on lunch duty or when involved in sporting or musical groups, for example. These situations are often great for getting to know students' interests and that out-of-school knowledge that we don't have time to tap into in the classroom. I think particularly with our more tricky kids, we can find that common point of contact and finding out what they love, what they like doing outside of school. And it's a great starting point that often yields really powerful benefits in the classroom context. So when we think about tapping into background knowledge, the first thing that typically comes to mind is what we've taught the students or what they're learning in last lesson, last week, last term, or even last year. But this element prompts us to think more broadly about also tapping into the rich and varied out-of-school knowledge that's there running parallel to what they're being taught at school. In this area of AI and knowledge at the click of a button or even a word command, the teacher's role as the sole dispenser of knowledge has long gone. Our role has changed dramatically and continues to do so. The massive amounts of information available so readily has significant implications for cognitive overload, and these are factors that as teachers we deal with on a daily and hourly basis, helping our students to make sense of and to manage that information deluge is, of course, an ever-present challenge and not necessarily one that was experienced by teachers in past decades. So with all this in mind, let's focus in on what the QT model has to say about background knowledge. So the element background knowledge sits within the significance dimension of the model. The significance elements attend to how we can make learning more meaningful and relevant for students by drawing clear connections with students' prior knowledge and identities, with context outside the classroom, and with multiple ways of knowing. The model describes high levels of background knowledge as being evident when lessons provide opportunities or the students themselves take an opportunity to make connections between their knowledge and experience and the substance of the lesson. And background knowledge includes things like prior school knowledge, of course, and out-of-school knowledge, such as local knowledge from the community, cultural knowledge, personal experiences, and knowledge of the media and popular culture. Now, similarly, assessment has the same focus. So assessment tasks high in background knowledge will be evident when a task provides students with the opportunity to make connections between their prior knowledge and experience and the content, the skills, and the competencies that we are assessing. As the description in the classroom and assessment practice guides indicate, it's a delve into the connections that can be made between what students learn at school and their own lives in order to make the learning more meaningful. We know, of course, that learning comes in so many different forms from so many sources: artistic, cultural, academic, first-hand experiences, influenced by pop culture, just to name a few. This element challenges us to think of ways to link the new ideas and the content that we teach to something students already know and understand. As we've mentioned before, only part of the knowledge students possess comes from their formal schooling. The wealth of prior knowledge about everything from unique cultural understandings and beliefs to knowledge about camping in the Australian bush, or being safe at the beach, or what to do when eating at a restaurant versus munching on a pie at the footy. Countless life experiences build a young person's knowledge of their world and how to make sense of it. If we switch for a moment to think about ourselves as adult learners, we are reasonably adept at instinctively making links between what we already know about something and the new information or the skills or processes that we're seeking to master. Think about learning a new language. We might start our Duolingo daily practice with great enthusiasm and gusto, as I did when I was fortunate enough to present over in Sweden at the beginning of this year. And I got out the book. I learned how to say, where is the bathroom? Where I would like some wine and cheese, please. And all of those types of very essential things. Hello, thank you, etc. And when we've drawn all of those more formalized ways of learning. But we also think about recognizing the language features that are similar to our mother tongue and other pieces of information we might draw on, such as when we've heard the language spoken in a foreign film, or when we're immersed in the sounds when we actually visit that country, or perhaps even the other day I was in Melbourne and I overheard people speaking in French, and I thought, oh, and my ears pricked up, and I thought, right, that's really interesting. I can understand a few of those things. So there's lots of different sources there that we can tap into. To make the learning easier, we automatically search for connections with known and sometimes quite disparate but related pieces of familiar knowledge to make sense of the new and the unfamiliar. This is an area of educational research that featured prominently, certainly in my university training in the 80s, particularly the work of Vygotsky's zone of proximal development and Bruner's theory around schema and long-term memory. But certainly the notion of building on prior knowledge is a well-established and accepted concept in education. I was reading the other day a commentary on something that actually was comparing and contrasting Vygotsky and Bruner. And this person, Charles, said students have prior knowledge when they build it up, they build it on their new knowledge, and that knowledge is not independent from the knower. And they develop this knowledge from information they receive from the external world. So acknowledging that knowledge and background knowledge comes from many different sources. We are fortunate to be able to link important ideas in our curriculum documents to that rich array of experiences in our students' family lives, as well as what they've gleaned from engaging in their community and interacting with the world socially. And we think of things like music and literature, cartoons, comics, advertising, symbolism in video games, all those visual cues, social media, films, political messaging, for example, the list goes on. So in summary, this element is about the extent to which lessons, tasks, and our teaching programs explicitly and regularly build from and draw upon students' background knowledge and require the students to make links between prior and new knowledge. So let's have a look for a moment at an example of this from the actual coding scale. And something that's quite useful, most of you would be familiar with the 1 to 5 coding scale in the quality teaching classroom and assessment practice guides. Not only can we use these for coding, but they're really handy to actually build the extent to which we can see a certain element in a particular lesson or an assessment task. Let's take a look at the coding scale and see how it might spark some ideas. So at a 1, for example, the student's knowledge, background knowledge is not mentioned or elicited at all. And at a 2, It is mentioned, but it's still in a trivial way, and it's maybe not connected to the substance of the lesson. At a 3, we can see that students' background knowledge is mentioned or elicited, and it's connected to the substance of the lesson. And by that, we mean the key concepts, the important ideas that are being dealt with in the lesson. And there's at least some connection to outside of school background knowledge. At a 4, we can see that students' background knowledge is actually mentioned in the lesson, connected to the important ideas in the lesson, and there's at least some connection to out of school background knowledge. And when we get to the coding of a 5, we can see that student background knowledge is consistently incorporated into the lesson, and there is substantial connection to out of school background knowledge. So we can use this scale to see what background knowledge looks like in lessons and tasks, but also to use it as a planning tool. Now, if we take an example, I'm going to use one from my music teaching background. If we think about, cast your mind back to, no doubt at some point in your life, you were sitting in a classroom somewhere as a student, or maybe observing a lesson where the students or you were being taught about the note names on the music staff lines, those 5 lines where the music is written. So let's just say that at a coding of a number 1, we might start with the teacher introducing the music notes on the 5 lines on the board, and perhaps teaching the children the little rhyme, every good body deserves fruit, e.g. BDF, and faces in the space. That might be quite familiar to some of you from way back, but with no connection to any other familiar tune, nursery rhyme, or anything else that's gone on for that student to do with music. At a 2, the teacher might introduce the musical notation on the lines and the spaces of the treble clef, and might teach them that the lines, the little rhymes about the lines and spaces, every good boy, etc. And then the class might sing their favourite Wiggles song. So there is some other music happening, but it's not connected to the actual learning. At a 3, we might see the teacher starting a lesson with their regular echo clapping, this type of activity, and maybe singing a little name song, hello, how are you, that type of thing. And then the teacher might write the notes of that song onto the board and perhaps label them. And then the teacher might then ask the students to perhaps turn to their partner and tell their partner of their first memory of hearing a song sung to them. At a 4, we might see the teacher starting the lesson with those familiar echo clapping and singing games, and then maybe writing the notes on the board and naming them, and perhaps then introducing symbols, the musical symbols for a crotchet and 2 quavers. And then the students in pairs might make up a little fruit salad wrap using familiar fruit names, and then notating whether it's crotchets or quavers on their little mini whiteboards. Now, of course, a fruit salad wrap has nothing to do with actual fruit wrapped up. It's sort of like, apple, pineapple, and that type of thing. So the kids use fruit names and generate rhythmic patterns. And then perhaps half the class might perform to the other half of the class. And at a 5, we might see the teacher again, starting with the familiar echo clapping and singing games, introducing the students to the notation of the written music, and it's saying, well, this is like reading words. So making some connections with the whole notion of reading words as opposed to reading musical symbols. The students might then learn the note names and the little rhymes, e.g. BDF and face in the space. And then they might make up their own words using the letter names that we use in music, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Perhaps they might work in pairs to place these words on the staff lines. And then the quaver and crotchet note patterns might be introduced, and the students might discuss where they've heard drum rhythms being played. And perhaps some person might even volunteer their parent to come in and play their djembe the next music lesson. So I think that, that way you can see, and perhaps another way that might also be brought in there is that they might discuss perhaps when they've seen someone playing the drums and playing rhythms on the drums, maybe at family gatherings or at concerts, or they might have attended some sort of a show or seen something on television or films or online where people have been playing drums. Now, this is obviously a musical example, but there are many other examples that we can tap into, and you'll find those in the suggestions part of the classroom and assessment practice guides in the background knowledge element area. But if you'd like to have a look at Laureate Professor Jenny Gore talking about this and other elements, then you can just go straight to the Quality Teaching Academy member area and you'll see a whole list of those. Here's an example just in terms of engagement, but you'll see that they're all listed there. Just scroll through to find the one that you're after. And Jenny has recorded 2 to 3 minute videos on every one of the elements, and they're really useful to complement what's already in the classroom and assessment practice guides. Now, in addition to this webinar, which is just a brief look at one of the elements, there are, of course, more in-depth professional learning opportunities, looking at the assessment practice guide in more depth in a one-day workshop, and similarly applying the quality teaching model through the Understanding by Design, or UBD, approach to programming that Grant Wiggins and Jane McTighe have developed in our programming workshop, where we look at designing units of work and reviewing the current units of work that you're using through the lens of the model and the UBD process, and also working on a one-to-one basis between the university and the school. So all of those things are available to you as members and also to your colleagues outside of the membership of the Quality Teaching Academy. Now, I always want to mention this because it's a great opportunity. If you have teachers in your school who are in the first 3 years of teaching, and obviously their mentors, there's a fantastic opportunity. The federal government in Australia has provided $5 million over the next 3 years to help support the induction or the beginning teacher in the first 3 years of teaching, and also to strengthen the experience for teachers who have perhaps been teaching for a bit longer than that. And so this project funds 4 teachers in a professional learning community to do quality teaching rounds at their school, and it funds them for the 2 days of training each. So it's a great help. And all the school has to do then is undertake to run a set of rounds, and the teachers do a couple of surveys before and after the rounds. But the training for the 2-day workshop is covered for those 4 teachers. It's a great opportunity to embed quality teaching rounds and the model, and at the same time to help with that PD budget, but also to certainly support our early career and more experienced teachers. So if you're interested, there's a QR code there, or you can certainly just jump onto the QT Academy website or just give us a call or an email. And last but not least, we have our Quality Teaching in Practice conference. The dates have been set for next year. It's in Newcastle at the university on the 8th and 9th of July. And the theme for next year's conference is the power of pedagogy. So we're really looking forward to some fantastic international virtual guests coming along to provide some great keynotes, as well as some really high level local and also national talent, plus lots and lots of school stories. So if you'd like to be part of that or just come along as a delegate, please let us know and we'll keep you posted on that. Now, if you have questions, please send them through. But thank you so much for coming along to this webinar on background knowledge, and we hope to see you at one of our workshops or seminars soon. Bye for now.